We are on the Temple Mount. Right now, we are standing. You see this huge space? Actually, underneath us is a mosque. This is what is called the Solomon Stables, is below us. Huge mosque below us, which you can't even tell unless you know. Of course, that way, that is the Al-Aqsa Mosque, which you're not allowed in unless you're a Muslim. The Golden Dome, of course, the Dome of the Rock, not allowed in unless you're a Muslim. To the mosque below us, not allowed unless you're a Muslim. Of course, right there is the Mount of Olives. The church on top is the Church of Ascension, where Jesus ascended to heaven. And right here, we're gonna show you the hole where that's where they dug up a bunch of the dirt with bulldozers and backhoes and dumped it secretly and dumped it into the Kidron Valley to hide any evidence that Jews might have a connection historical here. And they dug that hole to get to the mosque, to the Solomon Stables underneath us. The Temple Mount is actually very huge. I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's like 1/5 of the whole old city. The place is enormous. This is just around the Dome of the Rock, this big thing. There you got the Al-Aqsa Mosque. On the left of it is where that huge, where the other mosque is underground, the Solomon Stables. And you got a huge still part of the complex where the trees are behind that arch. So the Muslims claim that it's theirs. It's getting so bad before you could even go inside. It's not even actually a mosque. It's a they call it the noble sanctuary, so it's a sanctuary, not even a mosque. The Muslims are the last ones to come to the party. It was the Jews, of course, with their first temple, second temple, built by Solomon, then the first one, then the second built when the Jews came back from captivity to Babylon, then rebuilt, expanded by Herod during time of Jesus. And then when it was destroyed by the Romans in 70 AD, and then again in like 130 AD, Jerusalem, by Hadrian, the second destruction, the last Jewish revolt, and I think it was like 130, is when all the Jews got expelled. Jerusalem got renamed to Alia Capitolonia or Capitaliana, and there was a pagan Roman temple built on top of here. Not until after that, almost 600 years, is when the Muslims came here. And the only reason they built the Dome of the Rock is because they knew it was a sacred place, because the temple stood here. The Jewish temple underneath, which is the rock where Abraham was supposed to sacrifice Isaac. Of course, the Muslim changed it to Ishmael. So if you really want to talk about an occupied land, this is occupied land. It actually is administered by Jordan. Jordan that has no claim to this piece of land. It's only because the Israeli government allowed them, when they recaptured Jerusalem, to keep control of this area, and it's administered by WAF. It's called, it's an Islamic authority that administers this whole Temple Mount. But this is occupied territory. This was conquered by the Muslims. It never belonged to them until they conquered it in the late 600s. And now Christians, Jews, nobody else besides Muslims are not even allowed in there. They used to be. Not even allowed in the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Used to be. I mean, non-Muslims are allowed in mosques everywhere else around the world, but not here. Think about it, why not? This really is not, never was, a sacred place to the Muslims. They made it, it was a caliph that built this. He made it a sacred place because he didn't have control of Mecca and Medina, and he wanted to add influence, so he added a third holy Muslim city, made this to get influence and bring pilgrims in and bring money in. Muhammad was never here. Muhammad never ascended to heaven from here. He never ascended to heaven anyway. So this whole thing is a scam. Christians are not allowed to go, and Jews to the most holy site of the Jews. Christians, of course, are very, this because Jesus was up here teaching, spent much time here. So you can see the stark contrast between the Jews and the Christians, that anybody is allowed into their temples, churches, synagogues, not just their faith. Muslims purposely keep this, and they chase you off like cows. So we were chased off, but now we're back. So this is the Golden Gate, where the Messiah is going to come back, going to come through to the mount, to the Temple Mount, to the Jewish temple that hasn't been built yet. That way over there is the Golden Gate. That's the east side, so from where the Messiah is going to come. And obviously the Muslims are worried about that he's going to come. That's why I put a graveyard over there. By some theories, right here, this is where the actual Jewish temple stood. And that little building is maybe where the Holy of Holies was. And according to some people, prophecies, they believe that the third Jewish temple is going to stand right here next to the Dome of the Rock. So they're going to be both here. The Golden Gate actually is lined up more with right next to the dome, not directly with the dome. Even that's where the top of the peak of Mount Moriah is. So it's going to be very interesting what happens. I really got angry. I mean, I have a bunch of other words in my head that as a Christian I'm not supposed to say, but I was furious yesterday when we were chased off like cattle after 5 minutes being up here, while Muslims have unlimited access from tons of gates, can come up anytime, and everybody else can only come like 2 hours in the morning and 1 hour in the afternoon. As I said, this is a travesty, and it's absurd because the Muslims were the last ones that came to the party acknowledging this as a holy special site, and now they're preventing everybody else from. You can't even pray here. You can't bring religious objects. I mean, this is.
Which I hid in my headscarf.
And this is insane, but while Muslims, they can play soccer up here, okay, and do whatever the heck they want. So you want to talk about Islam being the religion of peace and tolerance? Bull crap. It's an evil religion. It always was an evil religion, and I cannot wait when our Messiah, Yeshua, comes back, what he's going to do to this place. I hope he destroys it before that, but I know he's going to destroy it when he comes back. He's going to make ash and ruin out of all of these Muslim, pagan, satanic mosques and temples. It's going to be glorious. I can't wait because I'm so upset about all of this. It's ridiculous. Little domes. That's the Golden Gate. It's a big structure, so it's more than a gate. They build up on the side of the gate through the wall this way. And of course behind it is the Mount of Olives. To your right, over there, you can see the church. That's the Church of Ascension. So that's where, after Jesus rose from the dead and spent some time with the apostles and people, that's when he was taken to heaven. And according to prophecy, that's where he's going to come back. And it says that when he's going to come back to the top of the Mount of Olives, he's going to split the Mount of Olives in half and come to the Temple Mount, to the temple that's going to be here that the Antichrist is going to declare himself God. So you can see how the temple is like, the mount is like that, so maybe, and it's lined up, that he would split it in half, walk through the gate, and the third Jewish temple would be somewhere behind me. And it does talk about in Revelation, I think it's Revelation, where the Temple Mount is going to be shared by the Jews and by the Gentiles. So the vision is that the Dome of the Rock is going to be here. Next to it is going to be the temple, and going to coincide, and that's where at the Jewish temple is where the Antichrist is going to declare himself the Messiah. They don't really know, because this is one of the most significant archaeological historical sites in the world, and there really hasn't been done any archaeological excavation or anything. So they don't know exactly where the temple, Solomon's temple, then the second temple rebuilt after return from captivity to Babylon, from Babylon, and expanded by Herod, where the temple actually stood, where the Holy of Holies was, because it was just not this. As you can see, that the Temple Mount extends that way as well, the garden. So they don't know exactly where it stood. As I said, one view is that it stood right here. A lot of it, of course, that the Holy of Holies is actually right above the peak of Mount Moriah that is hidden inside the Dome of the Rock. One day we'll know. I know our Lord and Savior says to love your enemy, love everybody, but I gotta admit, it's very difficult to love the leadership of the pagan, evil, satanic, Muslim, Islam movement. Yes, I've met many wonderful, nice Muslim people. No doubt about it. That's not who I'm talking about. I'm talking about their imams, their leaders that are just evil, evil people. And quite frankly, can't wait when Yeshua, Jesus, our Messiah, comes back through that Golden Gate and destroys all of this paganism, this anti-God, evil, anti-people hatred. I mean, Islam was built on rape, murder, deceit, lies, theft, and destruction, and conquer, and live. They live by the sword, and I can't wait when they die by the sword, when it's all rooted out. I'm sorry, I'm not sorry, but it is so evil, and I want justice.
You sound like David in all the Psalms.
Well, our God is a just God, but he's a patient and loving God. That's why he's waiting and waiting and waiting. But when you're up here, and when you see all the deceit and all the lies and all the theft by the Muslims, that they don't have any of their holy sites. Even their main one in Mecca, the Kaaba, that was stolen by Muhammad from the pagans. The Arab pagans that had tons of gods were worshipping there. Everything the Muslims have is they stole and they conquered. They took over pagan, Jewish, Christian holy sites, made them their own, forbid the other ones to go there, or they just destroy them, like they blew up the Hurva synagogue. It's a evil, evil religion run by Satan and started by an evil, murderous man. And God has a lot more patience than I ever would.
And the only reason we're up here now is because the Jews.
Because of the Jews.
Us.
Because
it's apparent by all the Muslims that they hate us being up here, do not want us here.
Anything you come up to, anything that is could be Christian or Jewish, they block it. They don't want you, like the Golden Gate, like Solomon's temples. They have guards there and they chase you away.
Stables.
Solomon's stables. So we were chased off of here before, The Muslims obviously don't want you to know what I'm going to show you. A huge entrance to a huge underground mosque. They dug that out as barbarians with backhoes and then dumped the dirt with a bunch of archaeological treasures into Kidron Valley secretly, and that's where a couple Jewish students discovered it, and that's where the sifting project started. Of course, Muslims don't want any proof of any evidence that Jews have historical claim to this land and that they were here. As you can see this, so the entrance is into what's called the Solomon Stables. I think the name was given during Crusaders, but you can see this whole platform. That actually is a underground mosque right next to the Al-Aqsa Mosque. They call this the Al-Aqsa Mosque as well. They pretty much want to make the whole Temple Mount an Al-Aqsa Mosque and claim it as their own. So a huge mosque below. You try to go over there to the entrance, they chase you away. There's guards, WAF, the Muslim guards. They really don't want the world to know this is here. And the reason is because there was a proposed agreement. It never went into effect, but during Clinton era, that anything that's above ground is Muslim and everything that's below ground is Jewish. So they have an underground mosque here. Enormous. It could hold tens of thousands of people actually. So, and there you got the hideous Al-Aqsa Mosque that you can't even go into if you're not a Muslim. You know, one day they're going to pay for all of this. Now they have control, but they're going to have a rude awakening when Jesus comes back. And they're going to realize that they served Satan himself. And Muhammad was a false prophet of Satan. That thing is going to be gone as well. And that's the other thing, is that Muslims really didn't care about this site until they conquered it in the late 600s. Muhammad never cared about it. And it was a caliph that didn't have control of Mecca and Medina that made this site holy for Muslims, so he would get power, influence, and pilgrims to come here. And it didn't really work much. That dome even collapsed at one point. It really all escalated when the Jews came back, and then when Jews conquered Jerusalem. So you need to learn your history, and you need to learn about Islam and what really is going on. Most of it, when it comes to Islam, is all deception and a lie. So you see, those are the guards I was telling you about. Oh look, they let those people by the entrance.
They just didn't like us because of my head covering.
Yeah,
they think I'm a Jew.
But she's got
Jewish head covering because the sun is hot.
So.
And I'm hiding my cross and Star of David necklace in there.
Well, let's go try it again. I mean, those people were there, so what are they going to say?
They're gonna kick us off and they're coming back over
yes,
there.
we will. So, right there. So who do you think, I know the answer to that, is we got the church over there and the Jewish flag, and then we have the Islam over there.
They're already yelling at us. They just don't like me.
How come they could and we can't? No. Yeah, so we got kicked off again. That group was allowed to go take a look over there. We weren't. Interesting. Well, that thing's gonna come down. That thing's gonna come down. Who do you think's gonna win?
Hello.
No, it's not my head covering. They just yelled at them.
Yeah. So certain groups, I guess, if you
It's tour groups.
Tour groups?
Pay them some money or
yeah,
something.
if you bribe them, probably you can get there. So, or maybe with a Muslim guide, you know.
Yeah.
So screw them. They're gonna get theirs.
glad they think I'm a Jew.
Well, you are spiritually grafted in,
Right,
baby.
that's right.
Grafted in. So I just can't wait for all those monstrosities to come down.
You don't have to show that, not me.
Huh?
Show that, not me.
Yeah, it's gonna come down, just like the walls of Jericho. It's gonna come crashing down, not soon enough.
Okay.
All right. Supposedly this is the third holiest site for them, which I always knew it's bullcrap. Because, look, if this is really so holy, I mean, look at it. Look how neglected it is. You see that? I mean, it's pathetic, and all the money they have, and it just shows it's a sham. It's not really that important to them. As I said before, the whole dome actually once collapsed. Okay, so this is like everything with Islam. It's just deceivery and lies, because it's permitted in the Quran to lie to your enemies, to say anything. They don't care about this place really. It's because Jews and Christians care about this place. That's why they care. All right, you remember Alibaba and the 40 Thieves and the entrance to the cave where they had all their loot? And nobody else was allowed there but the thieves? Well, let me present you an entrance to the den of thieves that 1 billion have access to. All the Muslims with their main chief of thieves of Muhammad. So nobody is allowed in there unless you're a Muslim. And right in there is where the top of the mountain, Moriah, where Abraham was going to sacrifice Isaac and God stopped him. That's where the Jewish first and second Jewish temple maybe stood, most likely, or as I said, nobody really knows. But the Muslims definitely think that's where it stood. That's why they put that ugly dome above it. This is on the western wall, western side of the temple mount. Just a bunch of buildings and offices. That's where the Muslim Waqf, the police, and the administration is seated. And as I said before, there's only one gate a couple times a day you can walk through for everybody else but Muslims. But Muslims have a bunch of gates, free access all day long, anytime they want. All right, as you can see, an Orthodox Jew, 3 Orthodox Jews coming up to the Temple Mount, they have to have the IDF, they have to have police to protect them. I mean, how insane is this, right? And Islam's supposed to be the religion of peace and tolerance. They have to have an armed escort so they wouldn't get hurt up here.
I don't know if they'll come all the way out because
They might
they're
not.
afraid of stepping on the holy of holies.
Yes. Probably not.